Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your cybersecurity background?
So my name is Duane Laflotte. I'm currently the CTO at Pulsar Security. And just to give a little background, the first pen test report I wrote was in March of 2000. So ages and ages ago. I have numerous certifications from offensive security and SANS, so two of the top providers in penetration testing and security testing. And we've been doing this type of offensive red teaming against Wi-Fi as well as protecting Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is kind of really core to what we do. So very, very glad you reached out.
So, my first question before we get into the security topics, do you think remote work is here to stay, or do you think it was purely a reaction to the pandemic?
Personally, I think what companies have seen, and we've seen from our company before the pandemic was hybrid and could work anywhere around the world, and showed up to an office occasionally, but for the most part, most of the customers we were working with in security were remote anyway, so it didn't matter where we were. I think a lot of companies nowadays are finding that with remote and hybrid work, it opens up not only a lot of the job market for different talent who may not want to live downtown New York or downtown Boston, right? But maybe super talented people living in other places. And now it's like, okay, well, now that we've kind of shifted to this model, it helps the company in that we can get better talent, maybe even at better rates. And it helps, the employees where we're like, hey, I don't have to get that really expensive apartment in downtown New York. So I honestly think what you're going to see is a lot of really large companies start shifting over to, if not, hey, you can work at home, to a permanent, just work from home, and it's gonna save a lot.
How does working remotely increase somebody's exposure to their personal data or private enterprise data?
So that's a big question. Let me unpack that a little bit. So it used to be everybody used to hug their data, right? They used to have a firewall, and you used to have your business, and you would keep all your data on site, and it never went anywhere, and you made sure that nobody could access it. And then with the advent of the cloud, people started being really concerned with, okay, well, if I put data out here, is it accessible, et cetera? I think this is the sort of the next evolution. Lots of even companies today on site don't think about Wi-Fi, because they think, oh, well, I would notice some sketchy guy or girl in my parking lot trying to breach my Wi-Fi. But you wouldn't necessarily, and you can hit Wi-Fi over 500 meters away. So Wi-Fi has been an interesting breach point for a number of years. And I think now with the pandemic and with a lot of remote workers, it's getting sort of the spotlight it deserves, where it really is a place that people should focus and be concerned.
So, as a security expert, I'm sure you're well aware that people are now utilizing shared office spaces, even hotel lobbies and coffee shops to get their work done. So, are there added risks to working on a Wi Fi network?
Yeah, so another good question. So when you're connecting to Wi-Fi, lots of people think of Wi-Fi as a utility, right? So I don't think about when I plug my phone into a wall outlet, because electricity is a utility. So whether I do it in a Starbucks or whether I do it in a Regis or whether I do it at home, it's all the same thing. It doesn't matter. The problem is now with Wi-Fi, and with as ubiquitous as Wi-Fi is, where people can connect almost anywhere, you have no idea who's really providing that Wi-Fi. And that Wi-Fi opens up a surface of attack. So to break it down into like Regis or shared office space versus coffee shop and that sort of stuff, both of them put in reasonable amounts of security. So there's the common, hey, I don't, if you and I were both on, let's say, a Regis network, most of that's going to be filtered in that I can't affect your traffic. So that's not that big a deal. I'm not concerned with the providers. Starbucks does the same thing, and Dunkin' Donuts and all the different places you may stop and get a coffee. They're going to segregate the user's traffic, so you're not as concerned about that. But there are still ways, A, to trick those systems into allowing me to get some of your data, and B, there are more ways for me to trick your device into giving me data when you're away from that coffee shop. So let's say you connect to a Starbucks all the time. You tell your phone, don't worry about it. Just anytime you see a Starbucks connect, maybe your local Starbucks even has a password on the Wi-Fi, which is fantastic. But then me as an offensive security professional, I'm going to spin up a Starbucks Wi-Fi with that same password you're going to connect to it, and then there's all sorts of nefarious things I can do there.
So I know this is kind of a big question, but what are the dangers of working on a public Wi-Fi network?
That's a good question. So it's actually really interesting, the things we trust and we just take for granted. So if you log into, say, a Comcast or an Xfinity Wi-Fi, you're going to get presented with a captive portal page. Or you log into a Marriott hotel, you're going to get, that captive portal that says, hey, what's your room number? What's your username and passwords that you can get access to this particular Wi-Fi. And nobody really questions that. So one of the big risks here would be I spin up one of those, sort of commodity Wi-Fis, and I get some information from you, right? So it might be your username and password to Comcast, or it might be your room information to, a Hilton or a Marriott or something along those lines. And that's sort of dangerous, but the real danger is in the fact that now I'm controlling your traffic. So I can man in the middle certain traffic as you're going out to the internet and coming back. Now, lots of people will say, hey, all that data is encrypted. When I talk to my bank, it's all over SSL. And I'll give you an example if we have time. So we were working with a customer. They wanted us to breach over Wi-Fi, and it was a smaller office. So as we breached over Wi-Fi, all of the traffic that they had to end users, all the traffic that these end users were using, bank sites and that sort of stuff, all encrypted. We couldn't see any of it. Even though we were on the same network, even though we had breached the Wi-Fi, we couldn't see that data. But what we could see was ad traffic coming down, which doesn't come over an encrypted stream. So you say, okay, ad traffic, who cares, right? But what we were able to do is then take those ads, which are coming down with JavaScript running on the browser, and we were then able to corrupt the browser heap for one of the particular computers. So when an ad came down, it ran a command, and the command we told it to run was back up the entire computer to a share that we have access to, that because we're on the network now. And at this point, we were able to literally spin up this user's computer like we were sitting at the keyboard.
Some of the other experts that I've heard from kind of praise VPNs as sort of a be-all, end-all in cybersecurity. Do you find VPNs helpful, or is it kind of providing a false sense of security?
So VPNs are pretty fantastic. They're good at mitigating a lot of the most common issues, because all of your traffic is going to get routed over, a secure encrypted communication. You obviously need to be concerned with which VPN provider you use, because some of them aren't as secure as others. But in general, with a VPN, whether you're VPNing into your office or whether you're VPNing into some provider, most of your traffic is going to be secure. The thing you need to be careful of with the VPN is most of the VPN is designed to secure your traffic going out to the internet. It's not necessarily designed to secure your traffic to other computers on the same network. So if I were able to get on your home Wi-Fi and you use a VPN to go do all your banking, I'm still on your home network. So if your firewall isn't up on your computer, you're not patched, etc., it doesn't matter that you're using a VPN. I'll still be able to breach that computer.
A lot of companies that we work with are utilizing cloud services to conduct their business these days. Are cloud services more at risk over a public Wi-Fi network?
One of the big concerns there is being diligent about what you're doing when you're accessing that cloud service. For example, if I were to do that whole captive portal thing we were talking about, you think you're connected to a Starbucks, maybe you go grab a coffee, and you decide you're going to sit out on the lawn. It's a nice day, you're going to do some work. You're not quite as close to the Starbucks as you thought you were, and I spin up an access point that says it's Starbucks, and you connect to me. You're going to connect to that cloud service, and you're going to do it potentially over a secure encrypted way. But what I can do is see when those DNS requests come out for your cloud provider. I supply you a different server to go to. So you go to my server, it looks exactly like Office 365 or whatever it may be, and you type in your username and password, and you're not noticing that maybe the SSL certificate doesn't look right, or there is no SSL certificate. I've now downgraded you to using no encryption at all. So little things like that, you just need to be more diligent about when you're typing in any privileged information, usernames, passwords, multi-factor authentication, because it's really easy for me to put a page up asking for your username and password. You type it in on a Office 365. I go and submit it in the back end. It sends a 2FA to your phone, and you go, okay, let me type this in. And then you give me your 2FA.
My final question for you is, as an expert, what might your advice be to someone who is looking to mitigate their risk over a Wi-Fi network? And frankly, should public Wi-Fi networks be avoided altogether when conducting business?
So good question. I don't think they should avoid using public networks altogether. There are some very simple tactics that we recommend to our customers. So first off, I'll mention, it sounds silly, patching. Patch your devices. Make sure that, that when I was talking about that hack we did before where we could corrupt the heap of a browser and get it to run commands, it was a simple patch that had come out 2 years ago, but that particular person hadn't applied it. So patching your devices, making sure that you have antivirus, and I'll say this, and it may not be a very popular thing in the security world, but Microsoft Windows Defender is probably one of the best AV and endpoint detections out there. Like, we write a lot of viruses in 0 days to breach our customers, and that's the one that finds us the most. So and it's free. So you might as well turn it on and have it do scanning and have it make sure that what you're downloading is not malicious. Being diligent about when you open up your browser. Are you going to the right URL? Does the SSL certificate look right? Is there anything that's weird about this page? Does it look like the last time you went to the page, right? Sometimes there's just little things that are weird and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna access it on this particular site. So those are probably the big things. If you control your Wi-Fi, so if it's at your house or at your office, lots of people think, listen, I'll give a long password. Maybe it's 30 characters, right? Which sounds long. Brute forcing a 30-character password would take a gazillion years. We have a crack cluster at the office that can guess 3 billion passwords a second. Realistically, we can still only guess about a 12 to 14 character password. So you say, okay, great, I'll give it 15 or 20 characters. You guys can't guess it. The problem is if you ever use words that have ever been used on any password ever on the internet, it takes seconds. So we have a password list that's about 1 terabyte in size. So if you say, I'm going to use the words of a song, it's been used. I'm going to use I love my wife, ! It's been used, right? So it takes seconds for a hacker or a red team to breach a Wi-Fi. So really the second recommendation there is if you control the Wi-Fi, make it a longish password, but something that's not going to be in a list, right? Something as random characters, etc. will give you a higher security on that particular network.